I lived alone that winter, and I chose it that way. The cabin sat about 40 miles outside the nearest town, past a stretch of road that didn't get plowed regularly. After that, it was just a narrow trail I maintained myself with a snowmobile. No neighbors within sight. The closest one was about 6 miles out, and even that was a straight line through woods and uneven terrain. In winter, that distance might as well have been 50. I had supplies stacked before the first heavy snow came in. Fuel, canned food, dry goods, medical kit, extra batteries. I wasn't new to it. I'd done 2 shorter winters before, but this was the first time I committed to staying the full season without leaving unless I absolutely had to. For the first month, everything went the way I expected. Quiet days, long nights, routine work, cutting wood, checking the generator, maintaining heat, keeping the place functional. It's a simple life when you strip it down like that. The storm that changed things rolled in faster than forecast. By late afternoon, the wind had picked up hard enough that I stopped going outside unless necessary. By night, visibility was gone. Just white moving sideways and the constant pressure of wind against the cabin walls. I remember thinking it would pass in a day or 2 like most storms. It didn't. The snow kept coming, and the wind didn't ease up. By the second day, I knew I was fully snowed in. The trail I used was gone. Even if I wanted to leave, I couldn't have. That part didn't bother me. It was part of the plan. What bothered me came on the 3rd night. I heard knocking. At first, I thought it was something hitting the side of the cabin. Loose debris, maybe a branch carried by the wind. It wasn't unusual during storms, but it came again, more deliberate. 3 knocks, spaced out, controlled. I sat still for a while, listening. When it came a 3rd time, I got up and grabbed my flashlight. I didn't rush. Out there, you don't rush into things. I moved to the door, but I didn't open it right away. I just stood there, listening through the wood. Then a voice came through. "Hey, you in there." It was a man. Sounded tired, strained from the cold. "My sled broke down," he said. "I saw your light." I didn't answer immediately. Not because I didn't want to help, but because nothing about it made sense. No one should have been out there in that storm. Not that far in. Not on a night like that. "Please," he said again. "I just need to warm up." I cracked the door open just enough to see him. He was standing a few feet back, covered in snow, face partially iced over. He looked real enough. Late 30s, maybe early 40s. Beard, frost collecting on it. His clothes were heavy, but not enough for how long he'd supposedly been out. "You alone?" I asked. "Yeah," he said quickly. "Just me." I scanned behind him. Nothing but white and darkness. I made the decision then. You don't leave someone out in that kind of cold. Not unless you want their death on your conscience. I opened the door and let him in. The first thing he did was step in and just stand there, like he was taking it in. The heat, I guess. Or the space. I shut the door behind him fast to keep the cold out. "Thanks," he said. Seriously. He took off his gloves slowly, flexing his fingers like they hurt. I pointed him toward the stove and told him to sit. I gave him a blanket and poured him some hot water first, not coffee. "You don't shock the body too fast. What happened to your sled?" I asked. "Hit something under the snow," he said. "Threw me off. Wouldn't start after." "How far back?" He hesitated just a second. "Couple miles, maybe." That didn't sit right. If he'd walked a couple miles in that storm, he should have been in worse shape. But I let it go. He stayed quiet for a while, just warming up. I kept an eye on him without making it obvious. It's a habit you develop out there. Trust, but not fully. "What's your name?" I asked after a bit. "Daniel," he said. I told him mine. He nodded, like he'd heard it before, which didn't make sense. I hadn't said it yet. I figured maybe I was reading too much into it. I set up a spot for him near the stove, told him he could stay the night, and we'd figure things out in the morning when the weather eased up. He thanked me again, but something about it felt automatic, like he knew I would say yes before I even did. That first night, I didn't sleep much. Not because of fear exactly, just awareness. Having someone else in the cabin changes things. Every sound is different. Every movement matters. At some point, I must have dozed off. I woke up to him standing in the middle of the room, just standing there. It took me a second to realize what I was looking at. The fire had burned low, so the light was dim. He wasn't moving, just facing the wall where I kept my supplies. "You okay?" I asked. He turned his head slowly toward me. "Yeah," he said. "Just couldn't sleep." "You need something?" He looked back at the shelves. "No," he said. "Just looking." That was the first moment something shifted for me. There's a difference between someone being uncomfortable and someone acting like they're figuring something out. The next day, the storm didn't let up. That was the second problem. He stayed. At first, it made sense. No way to leave. No visibility, deep snow, and unknown terrain. But as the day went on, I started noticing small things. He asked a lot of questions. Not general ones, but specific. "How much fuel you got left? How often do you go into town? Anyone know you're out here right now?" I kept my answers vague. He didn't seem bothered by that. At one point, I went to check the generator. It was running fine, but when I came back in, he was near my gear, not touching it, just standing close. "You need something?" I asked. He stepped back immediately. "No, just stretching." That night, I locked the door from the inside, not something I usually did. I also moved a few things around quietly, made sure I knew exactly where everything was. By the third day, the storm finally started to ease. Visibility came back slowly. The wind dropped enough that I could step outside without getting pushed sideways. "I'll help you find your sled," I told him. He didn't answer right away. "I think I'll stay another day," he said. That was the moment I knew something was wrong. "No," I said. "Weather's clearing. We go today." He looked at me then, really looked. For the first time, there was no strain in his face. No exhaustion. Just calculation. "I don't think that's a good idea," he said. I didn't argue. Not directly. I just nodded and said, "Fine, tomorrow." But I didn't mean it. That afternoon, while he was inside, I stepped out quietly and checked the area around the cabin. There were no tracks leading in. None. Just smooth, wind-packed snow in every direction. If he had walked there, there should have been something. Even with drifting, something would remain. There was nothing. I went back inside, slower this time. He was sitting where I left him, like he hadn't moved. That night, I didn't sleep at all. I kept a weapon within reach, not visible but ready. Around what I guessed was midnight, he spoke from across the room. "You live out here alone all winter?" "Yeah," I said. He nodded. "Must get lonely." "I manage." He smiled slightly. "I could stay," he said. "Help out." That was it. "No," I said. His smile didn't fade. "You sure?" "Yeah." We sat in silence after that. The next morning, I told him we were leaving to find his sled. I didn't give him a choice. He watched me get my gear ready. "You really think that's still out there?" he asked. "We'll see," I said. He stood up slowly. "All right," he said. We stepped outside together. I let him walk ahead. About 20 yards from the cabin, I stopped. "Where?" I asked. He turned, looked around at the open snow. Then he pointed in a random direction. That way. There was nothing there. No path, no sign. I just nodded. We walked for about 10 minutes. Then I stopped again. "There's no sled," I said. He didn't answer. "You didn't come here from anywhere," I added. He turned back toward me, calm as ever. "I came from somewhere," he said. "Not on foot." He shrugged slightly. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then I said, "You're leaving." He looked back toward the cabin in the distance. "I think I'll stay," he said again. That's when I raised the weapon. Not dramatically, just enough. "You're leaving," I repeated. This time he understood. He stared at me for a long moment, like he was deciding something. Then he nodded. "All right," he said. He turned and started walking. No argument, no rush, just walking straight out into the open white. I watched him go for a long time. He didn't look back once. I expected to see him fade into the distance, maybe stumble, maybe turn. He didn't. He just kept walking until the snow and light swallowed him. I waited another hour before going back inside. I packed up that same day. I didn't stay the rest of the winter. I reported it when I got back to town. Search teams went out once the weather allowed it. They found nothing. No sled. No tracks beyond what I had made. No sign that anyone else had been out there. They asked if I was sure about what I saw. I told them exactly what I told you. A man showed up in a storm where no one should have been, stayed longer than he should have, knew things he shouldn't, and left in a direction that led nowhere. I never went back to that cabin. I sold it the next summer. What stays with me isn't just that he showed up. It's that from the moment he knocked, it felt like he already knew I would open the door. I didn't even know the radio still worked. It sat on a shelf above my workbench, covered in dust, the kind of thing you keep around because it used to matter, not because you expect to use it again. It was an old emergency set, battery-powered, with a hand crank on the side. I'd bought it years back when I first started spending winters in Alaska, back when I still overprepared for everything. By the time this happened, I had better systems. A satellite phone, a newer receiver, backup batteries sealed and stored properly. The old radio was basically a leftover. The outage started sometime during the night. I woke up because the heater shut off. Out there, you notice that kind of silence immediately. The hum disappears, and it pulls you out of sleep before you even understand why. I lay still for a few seconds, listening, then sat up and checked the temperature gauge near the bed. It was already dropping. I got dressed fast and checked the generator. It had shut down. That wasn't normal. I maintained it carefully. I checked the fuel. Still had plenty. Tried restarting it once, twice. It turned over but didn't catch. The cold was worse than usual, but not enough to justify a complete failure. I didn't waste too much time on it. When systems fail in winter, you switch to backup plans. I had a wood stove, extra blankets, and enough insulation to manage for a while. Still, it meant I was cut off. No power, no reliable communication, no way to call out unless I got the generator running again. I went back inside and started the stove properly. Once the fire caught, the cabin stabilized a bit. Not comfortable, but livable. That's when I noticed the radio. The light on it was on. A small red indicator, dim but steady. I hadn't touched it in months. At first, I assumed it was just leftover battery life, maybe triggered by the cold or a loose connection. I walked over and tapped it lightly. The light flickered, then steadied again. Then I heard something. Static, low and uneven. I turned the volume knob, and the sound sharpened. "Hello." It was faint, barely there. "Anyone, can you hear me?" I froze for a second, then leaned in closer. "This is..." The voice cut out in static, then came back. "I need help." It sounded like a man. Strained, weak, like he'd been talking for a while. I picked up the radio and adjusted the frequency slowly, trying to lock onto the signal. "Say again," I said, pressing the transmit button out of instinct, even though I wasn't sure it still worked. There was a pause. Then the voice came back. "Finally, someone's there." "You're coming through weak," I said. "Where are you?" Another pause, longer this time. "At the cabin," he said. "What cabin?" I asked. "The one near the lake," he replied. There were a few cabins near lakes in that region, but none close enough to reach on foot in winter. Not from where I was. You need to be more specific, I said. Static filled the line for a moment. Then he said something that made me stop. The burned one. I didn't respond right away. There was only one cabin I knew of that matched that description. It had burned down years ago. I'd seen it myself the first winter I came out there. Just a blackened frame, half collapsed, with debris scattered around. No one lived there. No one could. You sure about that? I asked. I'm here, he said. I've been here. His voice sounded steadier now, like he'd found some strength. How long? I asked. There was a scraping sound on his end, like movement. I don't know, he said. A while. That didn't make sense. No one's out there, I said. That place is gone. There was silence. Then, quietly, he said, No, it's not. I felt something shift in my chest at that. Not fear exactly, just a kind of pressure, like things weren't lining up the way they should. Listen, I said. What's your name? Another pause. Evan, he said. All right, Evan. You got food? Heat. I have a fire, he said, but it's getting low. How did you get there? No answer. Evan, I was already here, he said. That answer didn't help. I spent the next 10 minutes trying to get more information out of him. Directions, landmarks, anything useful. But everything he said was vague or off. He kept repeating that he was at the cabin near the lake, the burned one. Like that should be enough. At some point, the signal started breaking up again. You have to come, he said. I don't think I can. The line went dead. Just static again. I sat there for a while, holding the radio, waiting for it to come back. It didn't. I told myself it had to be interference. Old equipment picking up something distorted. Maybe a distant signal bouncing in weird ways because of the weather. That happens in remote areas sometimes. But that explanation didn't hold up completely, because I knew that cabin, and I knew there was nothing left of it. I didn't go that day. It was too cold, and without the generator, I needed to conserve energy. Leaving the cabin for a long trip would have been a risk on its own. Still, I couldn't ignore it. If there was even a chance someone was out there, I couldn't just sit and wait. That night, the radio came on again. I hadn't touched it. The light flickered to life, and the static returned. Then his voice. You didn't come. It was clear this time. I told you I needed help. I'm coming tomorrow, I said. Weather's too bad right now. It's worse here, he said. How? It's not staying the same, he replied. What does that mean? No answer. Just breathing on the other end. Then, you know this place. I didn't say anything. I've seen you, he added. That made my grip tighten on the radio. That's not possible, I said. You came here before, he said. A long time ago. I thought back. I had passed by that burned cabin once, maybe twice, years ago. Never stopped for long. Just enough to look and move on. I didn't stay there, I said. You did, he replied. No. Silence again. Then, quietly. You just don't remember. The signal cut out after that. I didn't sleep much. By morning, I had made the decision. I packed light, extra fuel, rope, basic supplies, and a portable heater. I marked my route as best I could. The lake wasn't close, but it was reachable by snowmobile if conditions held. The generator still wouldn't start, so I left the cabin as secured as I could and headed out. The ride took longer than expected. Snow had built up unevenly, and visibility wasn't perfect. I had to stop a couple of times to reorient myself, but I knew the general direction. By midday, I reached the area. The lake was frozen over, wide and silent, and the cabin was there, or what was left of it. Same as I remembered. Burned structure, partially collapsed roof, charred wood. No signs of repair. No smoke, no tracks. Nothing that suggested recent activity. I shut off the engine and just sat there for a minute. It looked exactly like it should have. Abandoned. I got off and walked closer. The snow around it was mostly undisturbed. A few old depressions, maybe from animals, but nothing clear. "Evan," I called out. No response. I stepped inside what remained of the structure. The floor was uneven, parts of it gone completely. Snow had drifted inside over time. The smell of old ash was still faintly there, mixed with cold air. There was no fire, no supplies, no sign that anyone had been there recently. I walked the perimeter twice. Nothing. I told myself that was it. False signal, misinterpretation, maybe even someone messing with frequencies from far away. I was about to leave when I heard something. Not from outside, from behind me. A voice. "You came." I turned around fast. No one there. Just the broken frame of the cabin. "You're late," the voice said again. This time, it sounded closer. I stepped back, scanning every corner. "Evan," I said. No answer. Then, from somewhere inside the structure, I heard movement. A shift, like weight on wood. I moved toward it carefully. "Show yourself," I said. Silence. Then I saw it. Not a person. Just a shape in the snow. Footprints. Fresh. Leading from far side of the cabin into the center. But none leading out. I followed them slowly. They stopped near a section of floor that had partially collapsed. I looked down. Underneath was darkness. A shallow space where part of the foundation had sunk. There was something down there. Not moving. Just there. I crouched and aimed my flashlight. For a second, I thought it was debris. Then I realized it wasn't. It was a person. Or what used to be one. Frozen in place. Partially covered in snow and ash. The remains had been there a long time. Not recent. Not even close. I pulled back immediately. There was no way that was the man I had been talking to. No way. I stood up too fast and hit my head on a beam. The impact snapped me out of it, just enough to think clearly. I needed to leave. Right then, as I turned to go, I heard the voice again. Right behind me this time. "You found me." I didn't turn around. I walked out of that cabin as fast as I could without slipping. Got on the snowmobile, started it, and left. I didn't stop until I was far enough away that I couldn't see the structure anymore. I reported everything when I got back. Search teams went out later, once conditions improved. They confirmed there were remains under the cabin. Not recent, based on what they told me. The person had likely died years ago, possibly during or shortly after the fire. No identification was made immediately. No radio equipment was found at the site. Nothing that could have transmitted a signal. They checked my radio too. Said it shouldn't have been able to pick up anything on that frequency in that condition. The batteries were nearly dead. The wiring inside was partially corroded. It shouldn't have worked at all. I threw it away after that. Didn't want it in the cabin anymore. What I still think about, sometimes, isn't just the voice. It's what it said. "You came here before." I've tried to remember if I ever spent more time at that cabin than I thought. If I ever went inside, stayed longer, saw something I forgot. But every time I go over it, I come to the same conclusion. I don't remember anything like that, and I don't think I want to. I bought the cabin because it was cheap. That should have been the first warning. But at the time, it just felt like luck. Remote properties in Alaska don't come up often at a price like that, unless something's wrong with them. But the listing didn't mention anything major. Structurally sound, off-grid setup, basic generator system, a decent wood stove, and enough land around it to stay isolated. Exactly what I was looking for. The nearest town was about 50 miles out, and even that wasn't a straight trip in winter. The previous owner had passed away, and the property went through a relative who didn't want anything to do with it. I never met the man who had lived there. Everything went through paperwork and the local agent. When I arrived for the first time, late fall, the place looked fine. A little worn, but not neglected. The kind of wear you expect from someone living alone in a harsh environment. Tools stacked neatly, firewood cut and stored, basic supplies left behind. It didn't feel abandoned. It felt paused. I spent the first few days just settling in, checking systems, cleaning up, organizing things the way I liked. I found a few personal items, old clothes, some books, a couple of framed photos, but nothing that felt out of place. The journals came later. They were tucked into a drawer under the main table. 3 notebooks, all the same kind. Cheap, lined paper, worn at the edges. I almost missed them. At first, I didn't think much of it. People who live alone like that tend to write things down. Notes, schedules, thoughts. It helps keep track of time. I opened the first one that night. The early entries were normal. Weather observations, supply counts, maintenance logs, short notes about daily routines. It was practical, organized. The kind of writing you'd expect from someone used to being alone for long stretches. Then, gradually, the tone changed. The entries got longer, less structured. He started writing about hearing things. At first, it was small. Thought I heard someone outside last night. Probably wind. Then a few days later, footsteps near the back wall. Checked. Nothing there. I kept reading. It's always when I'm inside, never when I step out. There was a gap of a few pages then. I think someone's watching the cabin. I remember pausing there, not because it was impossible. Out there, you're not completely alone. Hunters pass through. Occasionally someone gets lost or wanders off a trail. It happens, but the way he wrote it felt different. Not cautious. Certain. I kept going. I don't see them directly, but I know when they're there. That line stuck with me more than the others. I closed the journal after that and told myself I'd finish it later. That night, I slept fine. The next day, I went about my routine. Checked the perimeter. Made sure everything outside was in order. There were no tracks except my own. The ground was hard and partially frozen, but clear enough to see disturbances. Nothing unusual. I told myself the previous owner probably just got isolated too long. It happens. Your mind fills in gaps when you don't have enough interaction. Sounds start to feel intentional. Silence starts to feel like something is hiding inside it. I'd heard about it before. Cabin fever. That evening, I opened the second journal. The writing was different. Messier. Less consistent. They don't come close during the day. That was one of the first entries. Then, they know I check the windows. I frowned at that. They stay where I can't see them directly. Always just out of sight. I looked up from the page and glanced at the window across the room. Nothing there. Just trees and fading light. I kept reading. I tried to catch them this morning. Went out early before sunrise. Thought I could circle around. The next line was written harder, like you pressed a pen into the paper. They knew. I felt a small shift in my chest again. Not fear, just attention. I closed the journal and stood up. Walked to the window. Looked out. Still nothing. I stepped outside for a full check. The air was cold but still. No wind, no movement in the trees. I walked the perimeter slowly, scanning the ground. No tracks. No signs of anyone. When I came back in, I locked the door. Not something I usually did. That night, I didn't read anymore. A couple of days passed before I opened the third journal. By then, the entries had gotten worse. They're closer now. They come at night. I hear them moving along the walls. I read those lines twice, not because I believed them, but because I was starting to notice something. The cabin had its own set of sounds, wood shifting, temperature changes, wind pressing against the structure. It was normal. I had already gotten used to most of it, but now that I had those words in my head, I started paying attention differently. That night I heard something, a soft sound along the side wall. Not loud, just deliberate. I sat still listening. It didn't repeat. I waited a few minutes, then got up and checked. Nothing outside. No movement, no tracks. I told myself it was exactly what I had read. My brain filling in patterns. That's how it works. I went back to bed. The next entry I read the following morning. They test the doors. That line bothered me more than it should have, because the night before, after checking outside, I had found the door slightly ajar. I was sure I had closed it. Not wide open, just not fully shut. I stood there for a while, thinking about that, trying to remember if I had locked it properly, trying to be honest with myself. Memory gets unreliable out there. You do things automatically, and later you're not sure if you actually did them or just thought about doing them. I convinced myself that's what it was. That had to be it. The next few days were quiet. No sounds. No movement. I stopped reading the journals for a bit, focused on work instead. Cutting wood, organizing supplies, checking the generator. Routine helps. It keeps your mind from drifting. Then one evening, just before dark, I noticed something. Tracks. Not leading to the cabin. Leading away from it. They started near the back corner, just outside the wall, and went straight into the trees. I stood there, staring at them. They were fresh, clear enough to see the pattern. Boot prints. Not mine. I followed them a short distance. They didn't loop, didn't circle back, just went straight out into the woods. I didn't follow them all the way. I went back inside, locked the door, checked every window. That night, I read the last few entries. They wait for me to doubt myself. They don't rush. They want me to get used to it. I felt something tighten in my chest at that, because that's exactly what had been happening. Small things, easy to dismiss, spread out over time. The final entry was shorter. I saw one of them. I turned the page. Nothing else. No description. No explanation. Just that line. I didn't sleep much that night. Around what I guessed was midnight, I heard it again. Movement along the wall. This time it didn't stop. It moved slowly from one side of the cabin to the other. Not scratching. Not dragging. Footsteps. Measured. Like someone walking and keeping close to the structure. I sat up and listened the whole time. It circled once, then stopped near the door. I reached for the light, turned it on. The sound stopped immediately. Silence. I waited a few minutes. Then I got up, walked to the door, opened it fast. No one there, just the cold air and the dark. But the tracks were fresh, right outside, leading up to the door and stopping. No prints going back. I closed the door slowly, locked it, didn't turn off the light for the rest of the night. I left the next morning, packed everything I needed, and got out before noon. Didn't wait for another night. I contacted the agent later and asked about the previous owner. They didn't have much information. Said he lived alone for years. Didn't have many visitors. Was found dead inside the cabin. Natural causes, they said. Nothing suspicious. I asked if anyone had reported anything unusual before. They said no. I told them what I experienced. They didn't argue, but they didn't confirm anything either. Just noted it. I went back once, a few months later, during spring. Wanted to see if anything had changed. The cabin was exactly how I left it. No new damage. No signs of forced entry. But the journals were gone. I hadn't taken them. I'm sure of that. I checked every drawer, every shelf. Nothing. Like they had never been there. I sold the place not long after. Took less money than I paid for it. Didn't try to explain why. What stays with me isn't just the tracks or the sounds. It's how gradual it was. How easy it was to explain each piece on its own. Until it wasn't. And by the time it wasn't, I understood exactly what the previous owner meant. They don't rush. They don't need to.